Then the analysis of the need, which goes beyond simply the identification of the need to understanding the need. There are people whose job title is business analyst. They make good money, they are valuable people, and they specialize in understanding business processes within organizations and analyzing the needs of the organization. By the way, when I say business process, that's just the phrase that's used. It's it's organizational processes. Government agencies, nonprofits have these processes also. So don't get misled by the use of the word business. This means processes that cross functional boundaries regardless of the type of organization that you're interested in. Then after the analysis of the needs and the documentation of the analysis of the needs comes the design of the solution. And this is where the programmers begin their work. Analysis is done in the language and the perspective of business analysts and others who see the business from a managerial or administrative view. Design is done from a programmer's perspective. And programmers do things their own way. There's nothing wrong with that. But just understand that design is highly technical. And just because a person can understand the analysis does not necessarily mean that he or she can understand the way that the programmers are going to do this. For example, if they're using an object-oriented programming languages, they're going to be talking about classes and messages and services and so forth. And that's the way programmers have been educated to think, which is fine. Implementation is the actual writing of the code. Software is created by creating what's called source code. And programmers write source code. A lot of source code now is machine generated by the tools that programmers use. But the point is that implementation is creating the code. The code is compiled into the executable file, the .exe file, which is the actual application. After the programmers have written the code for the application, according to the waterfall methodology, they begin to test the code that they've written. And this may well be hundreds of thousands of lines of code. In other words, simply a lot of code, a lot of source code. And then when they finish testing it, they deploy it, which means actually putting it out there to be used, possibly removing the old system, installing the new system. That's deployment. And then maintenance is the longest phase of the software development lifecycle. Maintenance refers to the entire period of time in which that application is being used by the organization. And during maintenance, features may be added and bugs that become evident that were not caught in testing are fixed. Generally speaking, I think the most expensive part of this is maintenance. But if the software was well written in the first place, if it was well aligned to the needs of the organization and so forth, then the costs of maintenance can be managed, reduced from what they would otherwise be. The spirit of the waterfall methodology is we do one thing at a time. no going back. I guess that's where they get the analogy waterfall. If someone wants to add a feature after analysis, then they can request that that feature be added later during maintenance. That's no going back. All of the code is written, and then testing of the code begins. And according to the waterfall methodology, there is a clear demarcation between analysis and design. Analysis is analysis, and design is a design. At some point, analysis ends, and the specs are written based upon the analysis. The specs go to the technical people, and they do the design. A line of division at that point. The other newer, better, modern approach is called iterative incremental model of the software development lifecycle. Here we have core process workflows and phases of the project. I'm not concerned with the supporting workflows. I'm concerned about your understanding, to a degree, the core process workflows and how that work is allocated across the phases of development. Notice that maintenance is not included in this representation of the model that you're seeing on the screen. In a way, the core process workflows are similar to the steps in the waterfall, but don't dwell on that. That can lead you to the wrong place. Progress is made in this model by moving through the phases, by moving from left to right across this diagram. And by the way, this diagram is not intended to exactly represent every project. It's intended for purposes of understanding the methodology. You have 4 phases: inception, elaboration, construction, and transition. And during most of the phases, multiple activities or core process workflows are being performed by team members in the project simultaneously. So do you see the difference from waterfall? Waterfall says one thing at a time, in order, no going back. This approach says we can do more than one thing at the same time. And that this is better, assuming we have a project manager capable of managing this. So in inception, according to this diagram that you see on the screen, we're doing quite a lot of business modeling. We're capturing requirements. And toward the end of inception, we're doing some of the analysis and design, but just barely. So basically, during inception, we're not writing much code at all. We're doing business modeling and requirements capture. We're not testing code. We're certainly not deploying anything during inception. And there may be several iterations of within the inception phase. The project manager will decide these things. How many iterations there are, what the deliverables are at the end of each iteration, and what the deliverables are at the end of the inception phase.